What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about how to interpret your PEAT performance feedback report. So in order to get this, what you're going to do is you're going to log into your FSBBT account. So you're going to go to customer login and you're going to click that and sign in. So I don't want you guys to know my information. So I'm going to pause that and get signed in. All right, guys, so once you're logged in, you'll be back on your dashboard. What you'll want to do is you'll want to scroll down to see the PEAT. So I had taken an academic PEAT through my school. That's why it's telling me that I'm signed up for my test because I'll be taking my NPTE for PT. I already just passed PTA exam, so I'll take my PT test years later. What you're going to do is you can either click View Previous or use Academic. I'm just going to click View Previous. Obviously, with all of this, is basically saying I'm not going to share repeat information, which I'm not sharing the information. I'm just showing you how to log in and everything. I'm not showing you test questions. Now, in order to review your test, you would click on these like these are the most recent you would have taken. You would click on these to review the actual questions on your test and go through those. Not going to show those because that's not allowed. So if I scroll down here, so this is a PTA exam that I took. This was a PT and these are PT ones. So if I want to click the most recent one that I took for PT, I would click this one. You're going to see there's two little things next to it. If you click this button, it's just giving you a certificate saying, yay, you completed it. And you're like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. That doesn't help. So what you want to do is you want to actually click this little thing that has a bunch of like lines next to it. You'll see it floating over. It says performance feedback report. When you click on it, that's how you see your performance feedback report. You can see everything that's going on here. So we're going to break this down. I'm going to show you how this works and how to understand what everything means. All right, guys, so let's talk about this. So first of all, the important thing is noticing that there's a lot of things on this page. There's a lot of numbers. Let's talk about them. So yours will look differently because it has different numbers and whatnot, and that's all that really matters. So what you're going to want to do is the number one thing you would look at is what did you score on this? I'm going to tell you right now, this percent thing doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't matter, okay? I don't care what your percent is on your repeat. It doesn't help me understand what's going on with you. If you're telling me what's going on, I want to see this scaled score number right here. So to find it, you're going to go to total, and then you're going to go all the way over, see those columns at the top, find scale score, boom, that's your score. So my score on this PEAT was an 800. I hope that at least shows you I know what I'm doing. So that's going to be your scaled score there. That's how you know, like, hey, what did I score on this? Obviously, a 600 is a passing score on this specific PEAT. Apparently, a 69% was a passing score on this PEAT. So now we know what's going on here. So that's how you know. This estimated NPT range doesn't really matter, guys. It really doesn't matter because all it's telling you is like, well, maybe on another version it says no. All that matters is your skill score. And I'm telling you right now, that's all that really matters. Okay. It doesn't matter which version of the P that I was taking, I would have passed this test regardless. So all you want to care about is that scaled score. Now, the next thing I tell you guys about actually when I'm reviewing somebody's test is I actually go all the way down to the section trend here, okay? So I look at the section trend of how you're doing in each section. So as you can see, I did very well through all of this test and everything like that. So mine isn't really a great example, but let's say that your boxes look like this. Let's say you had one over here that was green, and then you had one that was like yellow here, and then another one that was yellow, and then you had one that was like red over here. See how this section trend would go down, okay? If that's what's happening to you, that means you're getting fatigued through the test and you're not doing a good job with that test taking endurance. So that would mean take more tests. Now, let's say that your score looked like you were like here, red in the first one, red in the second one, and then this last two sections you were like higher up. That means that you just have trouble getting started with the test, okay? Once you're in the test and once you've gotten all those nerves out of the way, you're fine. Somebody like this, you might want to do these, take 10, go through 10 questions, pause, and then come back, do the first 10 questions again to get back into the routine. You might just be nervous getting started with the test. Once you're in the zone, though, you know your stuff. Like if you're doing well towards the end of the test, you know your stuff. Another thing to think about is like maybe your score looked like this. You were doing fine through the first two sections. Section three, you took a nosedive, and then section four, you kind of came back up. That just means you're not good at getting yourself started again after the break, okay? So all of what's going on in this section trend, there's a bunch of different things that can happen in the section trend, but this is the number one thing I look at first of all because it tells me a lot about how are you doing during the actual test. What I want to see for students is consistency through the whole test. So you see, obviously I'm scoring super high. Like I'm a very big outlier for this, so probably this isn't the best example of all of this, but this is an actual PEAT that I took, so It's more for credibility versus anything. I'm very consistent through everything. A lot of times I do dip in section 3, even though it's just a little bit. I tend to be somebody who does dip in section 3 after the break. I have trouble getting back into it because of, I don't know, I just think that I'm done. And then I come back and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta get started again. So that's something you might be struggling with. If you're noticing that, basically getting back into the zone, redoing some of those questions again, getting yourself refocused, maybe taking a couple moments. Like I know the last PEAT that I took, I improved my section 3 because I took a couple moments at the beginning of getting back after the break to be like, okay, I got this. It's going to make sense. I'm going to do okay. So that's what's going on. So just kind of be aware of your section trend. Even if you're not really passing all of your sections, if all of your sections end up looking like this yellow, but they're all like kind of consistent in the same spot, even if you're not passing, I know it's kind of hard to see because it's a bright yellow, but if you're kind of getting more consistent through the sections, I'm at least knowing, okay, it's not really a problem with your test taking itself or like endurance problems. It's going to be more of that content sort of areas that we think about. So that's what's going on with the section trend. Hopefully that makes sense of how to interpret that and how you do. Again, same thing. This is your scaled score in each section, kind of seeing that. Yeah, that's a big thing that you'll want to see. And yes, you can see 10 questions in each section don't count because those are the test questions. And you can see which ones those are. Now, actually, the next thing that I do is I skip this. I do the body systems class. I know a lot of you guys think, oh, body systems is the most important thing. Nope, it's actually the least important thing because there's so many other things that we can focus on and we can hone in on that will indicate to us if we have a problem versus our put that over there, versus our actual content areas that we need to study. So let's look at this again. So the big thing that you want to look at is how you're doing in each section. Another thing for the section trend is see how much time you spent on everything. So as you can see here, I spent like just under an hour on this test because I zoomed through it. So I was trying to prove a point. Don't do that. That's not a good idea, but also kind of shows if you know the answer, you know the answer, answer it, move on. That's a big thing. Don't spend too much time dwelling on it. If you know the answer, you don't see anything weird in the question, answer it, move on. But that's another thing to think about. So if your section trend, if you use like almost the whole time and towards the end of section 3, you were starting to fall apart, that means you were rushing towards the end of the test. So take note of that as well. All right, so big thing then we want to be looking at is what we're doing in our data collection, our diseases, our interventions, all of those sort of things. So as you can tell, my non-systems domain wasn't as good as my other ones, and you can see that that dips down a little bit. Non-systems this is our modalities, our professional responsibilities, our research, our safety, all of those sort of things. That's all going to be under our non-system domains. So if that's something that you struggle with specifically, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you don't neglect that part. Do not neglect non-systems. Do not neglect other systems. Definitely something to take a note on as you're studying to make sure that you understand these sort of questions. Now, another thing you're going to want to note here is you can see that the total amount of items, so over here in the total items area, you're going to see that we have a lot of questions about interventions. You can see that that's our highest section there. Interventions has 45 questions. The next highest section is going to be our diseases and conditions that impact treatment. And just letting you guys know, this is for the PTA exam. The PTA exam will have 40 more items that were graded instead of, and it'll have an extra 45 questions. So that's going to be different. But for this specific thing, looking at these diseases and that impact treatment interventions, those are going to be the biggest things that you're going to want to take a look at. If you're low in one of these areas, that's something you want to take severe note of and try to figure out what can I do to improve this. So I'm going to tell you what you can do to improve it. If you struggle with diseases and conditions that impact treatment, that just means you need to understand the contraindications and the pathophysiology of the specific conditions and how they relate to other parts of the body. Understanding that something like adhesive capsulitis can also show up with diabetes mellitus, those sort of things. The diseases that impact treatment section, for lack of a better word, and this is how I describe it, is how is this condition going to fuck up your treatment session? That's what you need to know. That's why contraindications and safety things are super, super important for this patient. Understanding that if somebody has diabetes, you want to always be checking their blood sugar to make sure they're not having an emergency. So that's what these diseases that impact treatment, knowing the signs and symptoms and all of those things, and the how do we treat it. So if you guys are familiar with my YouTube video, my podcast and everything, if you're watching this inside the course, you have those videos too. But when I talk about what does this look like, how do we treat it, that how do we treat it part, and the what does this look like, that is what's going on with the diseases that impact treatment going into the intervention. So what does this look like? Our etiology of it, that is going to be the big parts of our diseases that impact effective treatment, because you don't want to be doing something dangerous with this patient. So again, taking that information, improving your score on that information is going to take you miles ahead of where you need to be with your studying. So that's how you address diseases that impact treatment. Now with interventions, again, big thing you want to understand is the contraindications, but for interventions, you want to be selecting the one safest treatment for the patient. So obviously nothing contraindicated. Most relevant, okay? Most relevant. So again, if the question is asking you about pain relief, you're not picking something that increases range of motion. You're picking something that addresses pain relief. It's got to be relevant to the question that's asking. And then also appropriate, the safest, most relevant, most appropriate answer for this patient. So again, if there's something else going on with the patient and it's not appropriate for that time, then you're not doing it, okay? It needs to be safe, relevant, and appropriate, okay? That's how you do interventions. So if it doesn't tick all of those boxes, then you don't click it. For example, if you have a patient with a rotator cuff tear and they're just like, hey, I want to increase, range of motion, but they also have like strength deficits and stuff like that. And the question's asking like, how would you improve this patient's tissue extensibility? You're going to pick an answer that has to do with range of motion. Even though they might have like 4 out of 5 strength for their external rotation, you're not picking external rotation as an answer. Because one, that's not going to be relevant to what the question's asking, okay? Would it still be appropriate for this patient and, safe to do that? Yeah, it can be, but it's not relevant to what the question is asking. So unless your answer ticks all 3 of those boxes of safe, appropriate, and relevant, then you don't do it, okay? Makes sense? Got it. Anyways, that's how you handle interventions. So that's a big part. If you can make up some like speed basically in interventions and diseases that impact treatment, you're going to make the most impact on improving your score. Now, the last thing here is this data collection, which data collection, it's cute. We love it. It's not as many questions. Oh, I got 100% on that section. Go Bree. You guys it'll make sense why I got 100% because this is our keywords, okay? So keywords, okay? So when you're going through a question, being able to pick out signs and symptoms, all the keywords I kind of talk about through my videos and stuff like that. If you're able to gather that information, gather that data, saying, okay, I see that this patient has, for example, let's just throw out diabetes because that's a big one. Actually, let's do a different endocrine. Let's say they have like hyperthyroidism. Okay, we're seeing that they're heat intolerant. Okay, that's one thing. They have elevated levels of thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense. It might be increasing the secretion of the thyroid and everything for T3, T4. And then we see, okay, the patient also has heart palpitations and the patient's got the buggy eyes, the exophthalmos. Okay, all those are indicating Graves' disease. All those are indicating hyperthyroidism. So now you've collected the data to be like, okay, like which one of these, conditions does this patient most likely be experiencing? Hyperthyroidism, aka Graves' disease. You've collected the data, you've identified what's going on. That's what you do for physical therapy data collection. It can also be, what is the patient has low tissue extensibility of the hamstrings. What would you expect their straight leg raise to be? And you would see that it's like lower than normal because they can't lift their leg as much because they got hamstring tightness. That's what the physical therapy data collection is. Lots of keywords. So if you struggle with the keywords, and this is something that a lot of people who maybe English isn't their first language, this is what they struggle with. So understand data collection is those key words. So that's how you can make up some ground in that. Now, finally, we go to our body systems. Big thing, guys, we have our big 3 here. Do not neglect these. It's very hard to pass the exam if you fail like musculoskeletal or something like that. So that's something you want to take some time on. Please, for the love of God, do not neglect other systems. As you can see, there are between the integumentary and lymphatic system and other systems, which is like I like to I personally lump in integ and lymphatic into the other systems section because that's where it is like in the score builders book or the therapy ed book. It's kind of all under the same category if you're using one of the study books to study. If you look at this, there are 25 questions between all of that. Look at cardiopulmonary, there are 22 questions. There are more questions about things that are in that other systems section of the book. If you're using like the score builders book, there are more questions about that than there is cardiopulmonary. So please, for the love of God, do not neglect the other systems land, okay? If you are struggling in this section, that means that you need to spend some time there, okay? If it's integumentary and lymphatic, then you know it's, skin and lymphedema stuff. You know that's like a thing. Making sure you understand those sort of things. Other systems can be anything from endocrine, GI, genitourinary, our metabolic systems and stuff like that. All of those can count in our other systems. It's not a non-exhaustive list, but all of those will count there. So again, big thing with the other system section is it's a lot of safety questions. If you have a patient who's got some sort of liver disease, understand the patient's probably going to have some pain in that upper right quadrant, okay? They might also be yellow. Not good. So don't neglect that section. I think everybody knows how to study cardio, musculoskeletal, and neuro, going through not only just the interventions, but the pathologies and all of those sort of things, the signs and symptoms. If you're struggling with one of those sections, then you can go through and toggle your PEAT to see exactly which like questions are which, but you can see like, okay, like if I'm struggling with diseases that impact treatment and I'm low in these sections, it's probably, and you'll only know this by reviewing your test, you're going to be like, it's probably going to be due to the fact that I'm struggling with the pathologies. So understand those sort of things. Again, your scaled score in each section is how you'll be able to tell which one's which. I don't like how I circled that. So again, that's what's going on there. As you can see, there's a different passing percentage for each section. It just be like that sometimes, guys. Don't overthink it. As you can see, the total score for a passing score on the test would be a 69%. This will change based off the PEAT that you have. Some PEATs it can be in the 50s. Some PEATs it's as high as like 70, okay? So again, total numbers correct, total item numbers correct. This will be the total number of questions you'd have to get correct to pass. That's about it. So understanding this is how you review your PEAT performance feedback report. I hope you understand now the importance of the other things that are on this, not just the body systems. A big mistake I see a lot of students make, and this is really key, so don't tune out right now. A big mistake a lot of students make, and I've been on many phone calls with people who just barely failed because of this, is they will see their cardiopulmonary scores low. They'll study the crap out of cardiopulmonary. Then they'll take another test and they'll realize their cardiopulmonary went up, but now their musculoskeletal went lower and now they're not passing. Then they're like, oh crap, let me study MSK. So then they only study MSK and then they neglect everything else. And all of a sudden that other systems, the integ, lymphatic stuff goes down and that's what keeps them from passing and stuff like that. This is called chasing the weak area. Do not do this. You need to address your deficits while also continuing forward. I always talk about like, let's say that you're trying to train for some sort of like let's say it's like some sort of CrossFit thing where you have to like have the endurance and strength and everything like that. If you're trying to train for something where you need to be basically a jack of all trades to be able to handle whatever comes at you, which is what the boards is, because we have all these different body systems. If you want to train for something where you need to have, strength, endurance, flexibility, all that sort of stuff, you can't just stretch your way to getting better. You can't just strengthen your way to getting better. You can't just run your way to getting better. If you want to get better at something that requires you to be able to be good in a bunch of different aspects, you have to train everything. Maybe your weakness is flexibility, and so you spend a little bit more time focused there, but you're still doing your running, you're still doing your strengthening. That's how it's going to be for the boards. Do not just study your weakest area and chase the weakest area. It will never work. I watch people go through 4 attempts doing this. Don't do that, okay? All right, friends, hopefully this was helpful and you understand your performance feedback report better. And I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.